All right, very good. Good evening to everybody that's tuned in from whichever part of the world for this interesting session. For those of you who also attended the previous session on the cloud migration journey by Mallory, this is going to be a little bit of an extension to what we've been talking about on cloud, but we will try and we'll try and twist this the cloud topic with what's called as the fringe tech. It's no more fringe tech. All the emerging technologies, be it IoT, be it blockchain, big data, unstructured data, and the power of combining some of these technologies with cloud as we know it today. Let me just give you a little bit of a context of what we've talked about. I looked up the NIST definition for cloud, and there's a classic definition of how cloud today provides us resources that's 24/7. Anybody, any end user, whichever part of the world that they are, they will have access to either storage or computing resources or CPU. It gives banks like ours, rapid elasticity, ability to pool resources and sort of just start put measurement points, the typical pay as you go, which is what the CFOs of the world today like. Every company that's on the digital bandwagon, they like to be as cost neutral as they want, and that's it's always a trade-off against OPEX CAPEX. One of the things that actually has fascinated me in the last, I think, 4 or 5 years is the combination of cloud and some of these emerging technologies, like IoT with medical devices, IoT with healthcare monitoring systems, IoT with smart cities, big data with surveillance, big data with smart mobility, and things of that nature. SD-WAN is another topic that's of a favorite topic to all the CIOs. SD-WAN, SD anything, which combines power of cloud and another piece of technology, and then the benefits are quite immense. So that's what we're going to be talking about today, and I'm actually joined by an eminent set of panelists from the industry. Mallory, whom you guys heard in the previous session. I'm also joined by Manoj and Kapil, who are industry veterans. And if it's okay with everyone, I want to just shoot the first question to Kapil. Really, in 2021, some organizations that I speak to, and they are still fence sitting on whether to migrate to cloud. Should I migrate to public cloud, private cloud, hybrid cloud? What kind of workloads that I should move? What kind of cloud strategies that I should have? And Kapil, you have been a CIO, and you come from the IBM world where you spent a number of years in the product side, customer side, supply side. What is your take on, what would be your advice to some of these companies who are just still fence sitters so far as cloud is concerned?
Sure. Thanks, Deepak. Interesting question. Good afternoon, good morning, everyone. Basically, let me start with a quick statistic, specifically in the Indian context. So, as compared to 2020, our end user spending on public cloud is projected to grow by about 31% in 2021. And our overall public cloud services spend in India is going to be close to $4.4 billion, right? Now, that's a huge number, right? So obviously people are using cloud. The number itself tells that. Coming back to your question around, the cloud strategy and whether we should move to a single cloud, hybrid cloud, multi-cloud. I think the question is not about movement anymore, right? In today's business environment, moving to cloud is really not an option. I think, but it's really an imperative decision. And most of the organizations would already be on a single cloud or some kind of a hybrid cloud, right? So I think that's probably being fueled by the rate of transformation that's happening around you. Also by the overall disruption within the business space, right? Whether it's disruption through startups, whether it's disruption that's being caused by technology itself, right? So the business models have to be tweaked at a faster pace, and that's where organizations eventually realize that moving to the cloud is really not really a choice anymore. We have to be there, and we need to service the business by not really talking about, hardware upgrades and, cost of buying a software, buying a hardware, deploying it. That processes were really cumbersome, right? I'm coming from any organization and seen that world. It really slows down the speed of business innovation, I think. Right. So basically, by moving to the cloud doesn't really guarantee you success, but if it's implemented properly, it could help you build a lot of competitive edge, right? I would say you could be as nimble as a startup if you do the strategy right. And the advantage for bigger organizations is that they could compete and they could, remodel the way things are done. They could, I think the overall life cycle of a product from the initiation stage to the market itself has decreased drastically in the last decade, right? And I think so today, if to go back to your question, I think organizations are on a single cloud, then they start moving on a hybrid, start using their on-prem, get some knowledge on building of managing, say, a public cloud and a on-prem environment. And when you start scaling it up, you realize that a single cloud is not really an answer. It's got its own pros and cons. And that's where you start leveraging clouds that would work for your specific workloads. Something that might work very well in a Google setup might not work well on an IBM cloud or an AWS environment, right? So I think it's about it's really a journey, and depending on where you are, you obviously need to take steps to go there. Big transformations, I've never seen them to be very, very successful. They're more painstaking, and the ROI never comes out, right? So I think it's really a journey, Deepak. It's where you are, and from there, what is the leverage you need to take, right? So if you talk about multi-cloud, now you need to know how to run a multi-cloud, how to orchestrate a load on a multi-cloud, how to see the multi-cloud environment in a single plane of view from a overall IT control and compliance standpoint as well. So I think there are a lot of questions. It's a tricky question. I can talk hours just about it, but to I think summarize it, I would say that you got to look at where you are, and as I said, and then plan the next strategy or your next step. It's always good to have a roadmap in place when you're moving to a cloud. So it helps you kind of define your milestones and go and achieve it. And obviously today, as I said, cloud is really not a choice. You have to be there, or you'll kind of not be there at all, right? From a business standpoint. So that's how probably I would summarize or answer that question. Deepak, back to you.
Perfect. Kapil, I at least have half a dozen follow-up questions to everything that you said, but I just want to pick a few things. You talked about, and I want to, maybe move to Mallory and then, pick on some aspects and on, implementation. I think Mallory, if you recall, Kapil talked about, can organizations be as nimble-footed like a startup? Right, and be able to really do what bring the benefits right up front to businesses. So what do you think in terms of implementation? Talk about implementation of cloud. What do you think organizations will face or tend to face as challenges, and any word of advice?
Yeah. Well, let me first. I want to react to something Kapil said, because you talk about it's no longer a choice; it's an imperative. And there comes a tipping point where if enough organizations are migrating to cloud and using cloud, we know that it's scalable and it's agile and it's flexible. And so if you're not doing those things, it will take longer for you to release new products and new updates. So there's this tipping point where if everybody else is doing it, it's an imperative. You also have to do it. And that can be really challenging for organizations that are not agile yet. They are still in maybe more of a waterfall or a project-led mentality, because to really harness the benefits of cloud, you need to be more agile. That's really the whole point. You're not just renting servers from Amazon, you're really leveraging the technology and the flexibility of those cloud service providers to change and transform your business. So that's one of the first challenges, to answer your question and kind of tie these two questions together, is that this will be a shift for the entire organization. right? I talked a lot about it's a shift for your finance team because you have two cost models. It's a shift for your developers too. If you look at cloud, well-architected frameworks, every cloud provider has one. They bring in things like stability and performance, and security. Now, developers always built for those things, but the cloud well-architected frameworks include cost. That is a totally different mindset from the data center where you would build for the busiest day of the year and just walk away. You don't do that in cloud. You build something scalable and elastic that scales on the busiest day of the year and then comes back down to more normal amounts of usage. So that is one of the challenges that you'll encounter is a cultural shift and how to think differently. Now, the answer to that challenge is make sure your teams have guidance from IT leaders and make sure that they have access to their own consumption of cloud resources so they can start to think differently. Other challenges are things I mentioned a little bit during my talk, but I'll touch on them again because they're so relevant to this conversation. Because your business is dynamic, your migration and your use of cloud is going to be dynamic. And again, we need to be agile and flexible and nimble to adjust based on business needs. I'll give you a quick story. So this was back in 2017. There was Hurricane Harvey in the US, and it flooded Houston, Texas. And I remember working with an energy company at the time that had offices in Houston and a data center in Houston. The data center flooded. Now they were in the middle of a massive cloud migration. This flood happened, and their migration team had to completely pivot their plan to just shut down that data center completely. Now that means reprioritizing the order of that migration because it became a business imperative. They needed the stability of not getting flooded effectively, right? And so things like that are going to come up. We need to be able to adjust on the fly to still get that value, right? And that's sort of the final do I'll give you, right? There's do's and don'ts here. Do focus on the value that you're achieving. It's not a tick the box exercise. It's really going, what were the results of this? Are we more agile now? Have we released more products or services to our customers? Have we increased customer satisfaction in some way? And that's how you'll be able to understand the benefits that cloud provided to you.
Fantastic. Does that resonate, Manoj? What do you think? As Mallory touched upon, ability to scale, plan infrastructure for, let's say, like a big billion day sale or a Black Friday sale, and ability to taper up, taper down, and those are native benefits of what cloud offers. But some of the challenges that she pointed out were, they are really music to my ears. This is something that we face day in and day out, isn't it? What do you think, Manoj?
See, I think I resonate with what Mallory said, and those are some of the challenges that I'll take a practical perspective from looking at the challenges. See, it touched about open security, it touched about compatibility and stuff like that. Okay, so those are some of the things that can be opportunities as well as challenges. So every challenge, if you just turn it upside down, it becomes an opportunity. So looking at security, what she spoke about, it offers better security. See, better security is a perspective that you have to look at, because you are operating on premises as well as cloud, and most of the people, most of the organizations are operating in a hybrid mode, and there is often a gap that you will find between when they move from on premises to premise to cloud, and that's something that becomes a challenge if it is not designed and addressed properly. Then you look at compatibility issues. The way the applications work on premise and way they work on a cloud may be completely different. The way you have to handle them, operate them, may be completely different. So that's something that you have to look at as a challenge and also an opportunity. If you can optimize it well, then it can be an opportunity. One thing that Mallory told during the earlier session, I tend to agree to that. Does cloud save cost? Maybe or maybe not. You pay as you use. Obviously, all the tenants in a cloud service provider pay for everything, all the cost accumulated or accrued by the cloud service provider. Any cloud service provider is not going to pay from its pocket, and if you are using only 5% and not using the 95%, somebody is paying for that. Obviously, the service provider is not paying for that. Somebody, and it's you who will be paying for that. So that's something that you have to look at. It is always not a cost benefit that you will get when you move to cloud. There are other benefits that you have to look at. So other challenges that I look at is, completely from a different perspective, lack of expertise. When you are, moving from a platform to a platform, you need completely different set of expertise that you have gained over the years. So that's something that, need to look at. Then there is governance. A lot of time I find that, migrating to cloud had issues because simple things like controls and governance is not properly put. And one thing that Kapil also mentioned about multi-cloud management. That's also another issue and another complexity that one has to look at. That's also an opportunity as well as challenge that you always face. I will not talk much about the performance and migration because those are inherent challenges in any cloud deployment that you look at. And if you simple strategy, if you look at the do's and don'ts, one is you have to look at the contours of the cloud and design and migrate to cloud service is seamless. So it is like you plan it well. Then one advice that I will have is do not migrate all your applications to a cloud platform at one go, because then you are there's a significant amount of risk that you are taking on. Multi-cloud is a good strategy. I would not prefer to put all my eggs in one basket. And if you look at history, recent history, all cloud service providers have some kind of outages at some point of time. So if you can balance and play it out well and orchestrate all your cloud workloads, then it plays out well for your TCO as well as operational efficiency. So these are some of the random thoughts that come to mind because people, Mallory and Kapil had touched upon many of the points. So these are the aspects I think are pretty important when you are moving on to cloud. Over to you.
Thanks, Manoj. I mean, this is not random for sure at all. I mean, you touched upon a very key topic, which is, is cloud expensive? I've been following, the journey of Salesforce. I looked up Salesforce 3 years ago. They were at about $10-11 billion in sales. Today, they're about $26 billion in sales, which is like triple, right? Of course, they've acquired more companies. They acquired MuleSoft. They finished the acquisition of Slack. From what I've seen, estimates reporting, every 8 out of every 10 Salesforce deals, already has Slack inbuilt. But it's also expensive for customers, right? When you're buying, I think back in the day, you had like 3-4 options. You had a sales CRM, a servicing CRM, marketing CRM. Today, they have a plethora of products. And that all is enabling multi-cloud, right? So Salesforce launched what's called as a Hyperforce, which is touching what Kapil mentioned. It enables you to do multi-cloud, right? But it's also expensive. It's not going to come in any cheap. And Salesforce, knowing Salesforce, will actually make you buy an industry cloud, which is like a more exotic version. There's shield and there's protection and there's storage and so you got to pick and choose the battles. You want to be able to make the right kind of choices on what workloads that you want to push, what the benefit drivers are, and really be able to take the distinction between the OPEX CAPEX that we keep talking about. Having said that, and I can keep going on, but I want to move to the central part of the topic, which is really about, combining all the emerging technologies. And this is something that I want to open up to, all the panelists in today's discussion. I want to move, to Kapil first, and Mallory and Manoj in that order, if that's okay. So Kapil, coming back to you, what are these emerging technologies that you feel, really have the potential to push the boundary, disrupt, let's say, an industry that you're operating in? For the benefit of the audience, if there's any use case that you want to elaborate, that would be great.
Sure, Deepak. So in the context of my industry, so I come from the logistics and supply chain sector. So we are an express freight logistics company. And in that space, we are the biggest in India. So I think if I talk about the technology that would really disrupt, and it might disrupt other sectors too, but my take would be number one on the drones. Right. So I think with level 4 aerial autonomy, a lot of our labor intensive activities can now move to drones. So it's very relevant for India, right? Because we are still very labor intensive by design when it comes to supply chain management, just because the ROI of automation at a hyperscale kind of offsets the cost of labor, right? So, and again, India being so complex and so diverse, doing it in 2 or 3 warehouses in a country versus doing it at 100 warehouses in a country itself becomes prohibitively expensive, right? So I think to give you some advantages, I think it will help us be a little more cost effective. Consistency in operations and process compliance can be achieved using drones. You would also get a lot of real-time visibility if you have a functional command and control center. So let me take an example. So we do part movements, so which we call PTL business or part truckload business, right? So a given vehicle can have consignments from multiple vendors, and we are an enterprise company, so most of our business is B2B. So suppose it's Samsung, it's some parts coming from Mercedes, or it's whatever could be loaded in a truck, and these are big trucks, like 12 tonners or 15 tonners, 16 tonners, right? So now when we move these goods, we typically in our system, they get scanned on an average 7 to 8 times, right? So from the first pickup point to multiple consolidation centers, and then finally to the customer premises, right? And so as a part of this, by design, we are not supposed to have any inventory lying in the hub for more than 24 hours. Right. But as I think, we were discussing, there are peak seasons when the loads go up. If it's a Amazon Big Billion Sale, we'll start seeing impact of it 2 months before when the inventory starts shipping in and out. Right. So how do we do? And there are, times in which the activities are done, and unloading is done in a specific time, and loading activities are done in specific times, because the time zones for the vehicles to enter the city limits are restricted, right? So they can only move in those slots. The trucks or the vehicles that we have. So, and then during the other part of the day, there is some downtime. And the last few years, we've been trying to do stock take, which means that all you have to do is take an app, it's a handheld device, and you just have to scan all the packets that are lying in a hub, and they lie in a hub by location, right? So for every location, they are sorted in a way that the barcodes are exposed outside. So all you have to do is take a stock. So by doing that, we come to know that, the objective is that within 24 hours, we should always know where a packet is within our system, right? And in case it gets offloaded or, loaded without a scan because of human error, then they are able to trace it back, because we have millions of packets lying in a hub. It's a nightmare to find stuff if you don't have a system in place to do that. Now, we have been doing it, and some hubs do a phenomenal exercise or a phenomenal work at it. And then there are few or a lot of locations which are really not that good, right? Because it's a function of the individual manager who's controlling that location. So the overall hub manager who's controlling it, it's a very people intensive, a people specific kind of a thing, right? Some people do it very well, some don't do it, some don't understand the importance of it, no matter how much we push from the corporate. So a use case that we have been piloting now is about, these autonomous drones. We map a hub, and then they fly and take the inventory, by just getting the images. And in the backend, we have built a computer vision model, which can then extract the barcodes out of these images and tell us what inventory is lying and what's not, right? So again, this is still in a POC stage. It's not been done in India and in a lot of, I've not really heard about a real-time use case other than being done in the warehouses, but they have not been done in the transshipment locations anywhere around the globe. So, but I feel this is a technology that can bring in a lot of benefit, right? The SLAs to the customers will get drastically impacted if we know where our shipments are. We can run these drones to do scanning multiple times in a day, just by a click of a button from the command and control center. So I think those use cases will really come into play. And the second big technology that I believe is going to shape the way things are done in logistics is the quantum world, right? The quantum computing. So because I believe that it is one of the most promising technology innovations, which is likely to shape, streamline, and optimize the future of supply chain. For example, route optimization algorithms, right? Now that help, to reduce mileage, improve on-time delivery rates. And they are a classic example. In logistics, a quantum routing, which will use a cloud-based quantum computing to calculate the fastest route for all the vehicles, taking into account millions of real-time data points, right? Whether it's about traffic, it's about congestion, it's about the weather impact, it's about the local nuances in that area or disturbances, right? This can't be done in real-time basis, today by even using the fastest computers that are available, right? So quantum is going to change the way, that whole, complexity can be solved and can be solved in real-time basis. So I would bet really big on that. I think so. Drones and quantum, if I have to pick two, Deepak, that would be my preferred, technologies.
No, very fascinating, Kapil, some of the use cases that you talked about. So where you are actually beautifully combining, cloud and computer vision and imaging and artificial intelligence, machine learning, algorithms for sorting part codes in the logistics space. Fantastic. Congrats. I hope you were able to take this forward, from your pilot exploratory phase into large scale use. I'm pretty sure
hoping that too. Maybe next session we can talk about the success story. Hopefully.
Sure. I want to move to Mallory, and are there periphery use cases? Anything that you find interesting? You obviously traverse multiple industries. You've been in events and education, and you've sold software, and you have a diverse background. So how do you see this coming to the fore?
Thanks. Yeah, I looked at it from a different angle because I do work in tech and I work with a variety of sectors. So I think of it more from a cultural standpoint, and I'll explain what I mean. I promise this will come back. So my mother is 71 years old. She's retired. She's a full-time grandmother, and she can barely explain what my job is. She sort of thinks I sell like Apple Cloud, sort of. I've tried to explain it to her. Right. So she's not very technical, and she's retired and does not live in the space that we all live in this digital transformation. Nevertheless, she, as a 71-year-old grandmother, is able to create a website for her neighborhood community group. Now, how is that possible? That's possible because today there is a SaaS application for everything, right? We used to say, oh, there's an app for that, right? As iPhones became more popular. Well, all she needs to do is go to one of those hosting websites, pay a monthly fee, and just basically drag and drop a design. She doesn't understand anything about routers and networks. She doesn't understand servers or like static images living in a storage bucket. All she knows is that she's able to post updates to the community and click save and publish, and it becomes public information, right? That sort of ease of use for everybody is already transforming the way that we interact with each other, the way that we operate. Like, think about, like, just an example for this group. We're all communicating on WhatsApp to prepare for today, right? We're in different countries. I'm in London. I'm not sure if everyone knows that. And we're able to just text like normal, right? So this has already been happening for a long time. But the reason I think this is disruptive is that as we mature in our use of other emerging tech, increasingly we see startup companies producing software solutions, right? SaaS applications that make it easy to do things that used to be incredibly complex and expensive. And yes, many of them might start in a B2C model, like video streaming and music streaming, or like FaceTime video for me to talk to my mom. But we as consumers will bring those expectations back to the business and say, hey, I'm able to do this with 2 clicks in my personal life. Why can't I do that in the business? Right. And that's going to apply no matter what industry or sector you're in, because we now all understand the power of amazing software applications, and we want that same experience wherever we work.
Fascinating. The power of technology and what it can do to baby boomers, isn't it?
I know. She's a great baby boomer, but she is a baby boomer, right? This is a very different world than what she grew up in.
Fascinating. Manoj, any interesting examples that you find? I mean, you are from, you work with NSDL. You're the custodian of, public data. How does all this, stack up?
Yeah, so if you come from finance industry, you will realize that you are slightly, traditional and conservative. And that too for a reason. You won't, trust your money with an organization which explores a lot of technology and which is not time tested. So that's a background of the organization and the sector that I am in. But still, then there are certain technologies that finance industry is aggressively adopting. One of them is AI/ML, which I think Kapil also spoke about, and that is being adopted. And we are very careful in adopting that because AI/ML, there is a certain amount of risk that is associated with it. You want some machine to learn something that it needs to do and do it flawlessly. Suppose it doesn't do the way you expect it to do. What is the checks and balance? And how do you kind of reverse it if there is something goes wrong? How fast you can detect it? So those are the questions that are being answered before moving on to something like that. Then there are use cases like chatbots or virtual assistants which are being used. And one of the interesting use cases that finance industry has in blockchain, because we all of the financial industry use ledgers, and distributed ledgers is one way of making sure that the data that goes in is immutable. So that's one pretty strong use case. And all the while we spoke about analytics, maybe last 15 years we have been talking about analytics. And I would tend to believe that we have underused the power of analytics and the data analysis can bring to the business. So that's something that we would, betting high on. And one thing that also comes to my mind is the augmented reality or virtual reality, which can, improve the customer experience, improve the customer engagement as well. And as the context is cloud computing, I like to take it a little further. There is something called edge computing that we are moving on to. Like if you have a turbine, let's say, which generates power, and there is a small compute that is put on the turbine itself, and it feeds data onto a central system, that becomes much more easier to kind of digest data and make decisions, rather than all the data being fed to a distant system and over a wide area network and come to a central system for it to learn. So edge computing is another technology I would say that is going to it's actually moving closer to where the data getting generated. So all the while in cloud, we are saying that we pull it to a central place and then process the data to do all the compute, and then workloads are executed. But if part of that can be done when the data is getting generated, that actually takes a lot of load from the computing, whole computing subsystem. So these are some of the things that I think are some key technology that we may increasingly see in coming time.
Very nice. Absolutely. AR, VR, ML algorithms. You talked about distributed ledger. And I couldn't agree more. I come from the financial services space, and we are indeed conservative. We are regulated entities. Right. But we have figured, I guess, it's fair to say that we figured our way out into experimenting with some of these tech and trying to see how this really benefits our end customer. Bots, for example, that's something that fascinated me. Conversational bots. We launched a conversational bot just in the at the end of the first wave, which hit us, and we saw about 1 million hits in a month. I mean, that's unheard of. Why will a customer want to be able to go and interact with a dumb, terminal or a computer, right? But they are, they don't want to talk to an agent. I mean, let's face the reality. They're okay just going into a browser, talking to a bot, being able to see their balance or, look up their, credit card statement and things like that, for which there's no need for a human being at the middle of the night. So, fascinating. Yeah, we are conservative from that sense, but we're getting there, I would assume. I just want to do a little bit of a time check because we have run out of time and we have a couple of questions. But I want to see if we could first take 1 or 2 questions from the audience. And I just had the host put it in here if it's okay. I just want to make sure at least the audience questions are addressed. The first one is from Anand Srinivasan, and his question is, what are the challenges faced by customers because when they move from on-prem to cloud, and he's talking about customer trust. So I'm assuming he's talking about PII data, customer-centric data, personal information like name, age, phone number, sex, orientation, biometrics, iris data, and so on and so forth. So any of you on the panel want to pick that question?
Should I pick that up?
Yes, Manoj, go ahead.
See, the basis is you can outsource data, you cannot outsource trust. That's a very basic thing. And when you have personal data, you trust an organization with your data. So you expect that data to be treated with some level of care. And the privacy law, which is proposed by the Sri Krishna Commission, is still tabled in the Parliament, but we may have a privacy law soon. But nevertheless, irrespective of whether the data is on-premise or on a public cloud, the policy processes, that is what I was talking about, the governance, the data, whole gamut of data governance and maintaining a data lifecycle is the duty of the organization and not the cloud service provider. The cloud service provider doesn't know what data you are putting in the cloud. The processes, the controls, and the governance is the duty of the organization which is collecting data from customers. So that is context of data controller and data. So the data controller is responsible to maintain the sanctity of the data due care. So there is GDPR. There are earlier there are OECD principles or APEC principles that are complied to for privacy, data privacy, but now there is GDPR which is being used. So nevertheless, data governance is the duty of the organization which collects data from you, and they need to stick to the conditions or the terms that are being agreed when they collected data, irrespective of whether it is on-prem or cloud. So that doesn't change.
Perfect. Great answer. Anand, I hope you tuned in and you were able to hear what Anand was saying, except for the last 5 seconds where we lost a little bit of audio. Sorry about that. The next question is from Gaurav Sharma, and his question is, what is the one driving factor which is the most essential when moving from on-prem to cloud? Do you want to take this, Mallory, Kapil?
I think I'll take that one. 2 words: business value, right? And that is going to change based on what your business does and how you measure value. I've worked with supermarkets where cost is actually extremely important to them because supermarkets have very small margins for profit. I've worked with software companies where their business value is the best possible customer experience. And so they would optimize for minimal latency, for example, in their application. I've worked with streaming companies where they're B2C and they ultimately want to bring more users to their platform. So they are looking at how do they improve their algorithms? How do they improve their content offerings? But ultimately, it all boils down to business value. And as you're planning that migration and executing it and measuring it and optimizing it, really keep that North Star for your company front of mind so that every decision you make goes back into how do we get value out of this investment.
Absolutely spot on, Mallory. It's always about customer first. What's the value that we can push upstream? How do we shift left and make these efficiency shifts in terms of benefits to customers? Bang on. I'm gonna just put you guys in a spot, ask you a quick fire question, and maybe we could wind with that. That's all right.
Let's go.
Okay, so question is as follows. So let's say the CFO of your company walks up to you and gives you $100 million check and tells you what kind of technologies that that you will put this money on. What will you be your big bets? Starting with Kapil.
$100 million, huh? That's a lot of money. So as I said, probably a big bet for me would be around quantum space because it's still very nascent in terms of what we understand. And I think the recent achievement by IBM within the quantum space will further redefine how this will be done. But I think there'll be a sizable spend in terms of R&D for organizations to understand quantum computing and to design for quantum machines, right? So there would be a good amount of spend to do that R&D, and $100 million would give you that leap into and a competitive edge to move forward in that space. And as I said, I think Manoj spoke about edge computing. I think it's very relevant in India, very relevant for us too. We do a lot of edge computing work because a lot of the scanners today are almost like a full-blown computer, right? So, and the way India is, you don't have internet everywhere. So cloud literally does not work if you're not connected, right? So you got to bring that intelligence into your handheld devices. And that's where we do a lot of R&D, where a lot of our computer models and a lot of our AI ML models actually work on the device, right? So they don't really have to go back to the grid for it to work. But again, that's that I think is going to stay that way because of the demographics and because of how complex the country is. So that's really another area which requires a good amount of investment because building those models for edge is a sizable spend. And I think the third area for me would be around we spoke about industrial IoT and touched upon IoT. I think IoT has been done and it's already out there. Today it's an off-the-shelf offering. What we need to do on top of IoT is the business intelligence part, that layer. I think so that would be my third spend in terms of building a cognitive enterprise, which means that we are not just creating algorithms that can predict, but actually algorithms that can prescribe, that can do a fair amount of picking for us in terms of what should work and what should not, right? So that again goes back to your quantum and ties back into it because you need that kind of compute to solve that level of complexity with those many number of variables, specifically in logistics and supply chain.
Very, very interesting and very bold. You're one of the very few CIOs that will probably put money into quantum research. But full marks to you on that. Manoj?
So, very interesting question. Edge computing is something that Kapil has already spoken. That's one area I would like to invest in. The second, and not the second, maybe the parallel area that I would probably look at is automation. See, one thing that all financial industry wants it, error-free and transactions systems working without any human intervention. So that's something that I would bet heavily on. one automation. So automation may be just one word, but if you look at automation, it can be done at a different your OLTP systems, your transactions, your customer experience. All this requires some degree of automation. So some can be, I mean, your transaction system can be probably automated up to 90% or 80%. So that's something that I would look at aggressively. And the other thing that I would look at is improving analytics. So data giving data. So that's a slice and dicing of the data to get intelligence out of it and make enable business to make the right decisions is another area probably I'd like to invest in. So these are some 2-3 different areas that I think are very relevant to the kind of industry that you operated. And this investment will definitely bring some returns onto these areas.
Fantastic. I tend to agree that we are very under leveraged on data analytics, automation. We've been talking about it. We're still scratching the surface, but definitely there's a lot that we can do. Mallory, I give you the last word.
Well, I was going to say analytics, but Manoj took my thunder. So I agree. I think that there's so much we can do with big data, and getting the insight out of that data is really the ultimate goal. But since that's been said, green technology, right? We just wrapped up COP26 in Glasgow. You saw incredible partnership with US and China. You saw Modi's announcement that India will go to net zero. That's huge for such an enormous and developing country like India. And just like automation, green tech is such a big topic, but that's because the problem is so complex, right? So we need technology that addresses all of these different problems and still allows people to have good quality of life and expand their own economies. And there's so much potential there, especially as the younger generation goes to university and then gets into the job market. I think we're going to see amazing innovations in that space.
Fantastic. Green tech for humanity.
Exactly. Yep.
So on that note, I want to hand back to my host, and this was a fantastic panel. I really enjoyed hosting this, and I want to thank Manoj, Kapil, and Mallory for your time and for sharing some fantastic insights. Thank you so much.
You're a great host, Deepak. Thank you. Take care.